Hi, everyone. I'm Deepa, and I do AI workflows around topics that we can apply in our day to day lives. Interesting AI workflows, not just to help us use AI for us to be more effective and also to understand ourselves. So, today's topic is AI and religion. Just a disclaimer, I love all religions. I love all religions, and I'm not a very religious person myself. I'm born Hindu. And I went to a Catholic school right from kindergarten to grade 12. So, in fact, for the longest period of time, I knew more about Christianity than I knew about Hinduism. Hinduism was never taught to us. It's a way of life, it's a way of living. And it was all that I know about Hinduism, and a lot of it, my understanding is wrong, which I have recently corrected it by reading Gita. But whatever I've learned is through observation. I grew up in a joint family, so I had my grandparents live with us. So I've had really good exposure to my grandparents and I have learned a lot from them. They come from the land of Krishna. So Vrindavan, Agra, Mathura, like these three cities are literally Krishna land. And my granddad, he's done his PhD in Hindi. He's been a professor at a University of Agra. So, like, he has himself written many books and dug into history. So he's very knowledgeable. My grandmom also like spoke the local Krishna dialect. So what I'm trying to say is that nobody ever taught me anything, but everything that I've learned today about Hinduism is just through observation, very free flowing thing. But then as you grow up in the Indian society, you learn about so many rules, you learn about dharma, and all my understanding about dharma has been wrong. What I'm trying to say is that I'm not a very religious person. The few things that I celebrate is Diwali because I really love the festival. Not and yeah, I love praying to Ganesh. Like he's the remover of all obstacle. It's very selfish for me to pray to him because he's going to remove all the obstacles from my path. So I pray to Ganesh. I also pray to Lakshmi. She's a goddess of wealth. I do need wealth and all kinds of wealth. Like health is also wealth. So yeah, again, reasons are very selfish. I only go to God when I am like when I need him. So otherwise, I don't even remember he exists. So that's been my life so far. But for the past 2 years, been like trying to understand religion. I'm trying to understand like what does it got to offer us. And so the only lesson that ever stayed with me was about uh, Krishna telling Arjuna, which is on the battlefield. There's a war happening between him and his cousins. There are like and he thinks it's all family at the end of the day. This war is going to cause massive destruction. No side is going to come out as a winner because you're literally fighting your own family. So no side is going to come out as a winner. And he's really nervous. He doesn't want to fight this war. And Krishna literally comes from Vrindavan, all the way from Vrindavan on the battlefield and with Arjun. He's with Arjun and he's giving him this lecture on why he should fight this war. And that whole discourse becomes Bhagavad Gita. That's the Hindu it's not like it's kind of like a reference book. It has answers to everything. And I'm reading a very condensed modern version of Gita. I found answers to everything. All confusing parts of my life, I found answers too. So I would highly recommend, not as a religious text, it's not a religious, it's just a discourse, like a lecture being given to Arjuna, like why he should fight the war. Like imagine a god telling and every he's a warrior. Arjun is a warrior. And he's also comes from the family of royals. At the same time, he's not God. And Krishna is God. And Krishna is telling Arjun, fight the war. And this is the most fascinating thing. Like a God is telling a human being to fight the war. Like he's literally in so many different ways trying to tell him to fight the war. Krishna's role was only to like guide him and tell him, but the choice is his whether he wants to fight or not. And that's how Gita ends. Like the choice is ultimately yours. But it's very fascinating. And that whole lecture is Bhagavad Gita. Reading Gita has really broadened my understanding. I also love like all other religions, because, and I'm very curious. Like whenever I meet people, I always want to dig in and understand their religion. So for instance, my hairdresser in Vancouver is a Japanese guy. He's from Tokyo. And whenever I go to him, I'm constantly chatting with him. And he also is very curious about Hinduism. But I learned about Shinto, which is like a Japanese religion. It's also a way of life, just like Hinduism. They also think life exists in everything, not just in living beings, but like objects like this phone, there's life in it, there's life in this book, so life exists. And even though in Japan Buddhism is very popular, and now even Christianity is popular, there's a Spanish saint who got Christianity to Japan. But like Shinto is a way of living. So no matter if you're Buddhist or you are Catholic or you whatever your religion is, if you're a Japanese, you are a Shinto first. Shinto is a way of living. It cannot be acquired by reading books. It can only be acquired through observation, through practice, and through being very mindful about practicing it. So that's one. Then I was raised, I mean, I went to a boarding school, which was a Catholic school. So I know a fair deal about Christianity. Um, I know I know about learning about a new sect from Persia, Baha'i. I know about Jainism, which is like a derivative of Hinduism. And Jainism is very peaceful religion. They don't even pick flowers or they don't even do flower offerings because they think that there could be an insect. They don't even eat underground like root vegetables because they think while you're pulling that root vegetable out, you will kill like other living beings like ants or whatever like is found in the soil. So it's a very peaceful very in like in harmony with nature kind of religion. And so Jains don't eat like a lot of root vegetables. They don't make flower offerings for these reasons. So I know about Jainism. Have always known about Buddhism because Buddha originated from India and I know his story. I've learned Indian history, so I know Buddha's story. He was a son of a king's prince, and he got disenchanted by all the war and the misery. And what I really like about Buddha is that he gave up everything. He gave up his wealth. He gave up all his comforts, all living like the joy of living in the palace. He didn't think about it. He just gave up, and he wanted to understand people and what is the reason behind the misery and why are people sad. And so he started mingling with people on the ground. He became a commoner. He would go and be with them and then try to understand them. And then he realized that even through that, like, what can he do? Like, and so he basically went and attained nirvana. He meditated. And then from that came some of the philosophies. So this was my understanding of Buddha. I didn't really know how popular Buddhism is outside India up till then. But when I went to like Singapore and I traveled to Cambodia, Thailand, I saw like Buddhist monks everywhere. In Japan, Buddhism is very strong. And I think mostly where I realized Buddhism is really strong is in the West when I moved to California. And then I traveled to Boulder, which is very like a highly spiritual place. Like they believe in Eastern philosophies, and Buddhism is very, very strong there as well. Just in Western culture, like Buddhism is very strong. Like everywhere you go, you see like a statue of Buddha. It's so popular. So that made me like want to understand Buddhism more. And it was kind of different from Hinduism because like dharma is defined differently in Buddhism. Buddhism believes in nirvana, which is like detachment from all desires. And now that I finished reading Gita, let me just show you because I've been talking a lot. Let me just show you a few things. Yeah, I'll just start with this because I've started digging deeper since I read Gita, and Gita made few distinctions. So I was walking around Vancouver and I came across this statue, and as I said, I've been exposed to like all the derivatives of Hinduism, like all the religions that got derived from Hinduism, which is Buddhism, Jainism, Sikhism. Sikhs are like people who wear the turban and they have their own philosophy. And now that I started reading Gita, I started understanding the distinctions as well. And I figured for myself that I think the scriptures that were written, like Bhagavad Gita, that was written like 4,000 years ago, is like the best operating manual for humans because it considers human as like a human made up with all flaws. Like human beings are flawed, and so it doesn't try to like shun you down. It doesn't try to say, detach yourself from this and detach yourself from that and don't think about this, because anytime you try to like shun a human down, like say do not think about this or this is a bad thought, you create tension. You're creating unnecessary tension and stress, and that leads to misery, and you're not really like achieving nirvana of sorts because it's like taking like a more hermit lifestyle. So Hinduism doesn't believe in like you should abandon everything, neither it believes that you should desire everything. What it believes is that flow, just go with reality, whatever reality has to offer, go with it. And karma is the ultimate check, ultimate self regulation tool that exists for humanity. Because karmic debt is something that you can never get rid of. And so, Like it's something that you acquire from your past life, which you have no control of, but karma can also be earned through good deeds. And so I would say, like, now my philosophy in life is to just increase my karmic wealth. I can't control the karma I inherited, but I can control the karma that I earn for myself. So just do good deeds. And if you don't, and if you accumulate bad karma, like through your bad actions, then either it'll show you will suffer in this this life or next life, or somebody in your family will suffer. Basically, somebody will bear the fruits of your bad karma. So try to like the only wealth you should maximize for is karmic wealth. But anyways, let's get back to this. So I studied Buddhism. So I want you to know whether it's a Jain Mahavirji statue of Buddhist, because I always got confused as a kid. And I ran it into Grok, and Grok said it's Buddha. And I'm like, what's the difference? What's the facial differences? And so it basically started explaining like how Buddha has a hair, it has a snail, things like this. The untold story of Jainism. Jain, like the statue is like completely bald, and so quick differences in full statues. And so basically, I learned about everything 19. So then I was interested. How did Buddha become so popular in the West? What's the reason? Because I was shocked. I've learned about Buddhism, as I said, in the context of like our history lesson, but not in terms of spirituality. And when I got out of India and I traveled across the world, I saw like, how Buddhism is so popular. And I was curious. I'm like, what is it? And I did like their philosophy about detachment and stuff. I started understanding it. But then when I read Gita and I realized Gita is the ultimate source of living and has answers to everything, I was like, why is Buddhism so famous then? Because they are preaching few things that are really wrong. And so I inquired, I can share this thread. It's really interesting, like 19th century Zen boom and counterculture explosion. People in the West were looking for a quick fix, and Buddhism was designed for export. You know, it was purposely designed for export. Take these four principles. Like you take this, it's like highly simple, stripped down version, very stripped down that you forget the meaning behind few things. And then also the whole Tibetan movement. You know, India gave Dalai Lama and Tibetan people shelter. And I've grown up with Tibetan people around me. I've visited so many Tibetan markets. I love them, absolutely love them. But because of the West, there was a whole Save Tibet movement also that got started. And so that popularized Buddhism. And then these statues, like this is all marketing. Like some guy is building this, some guy is making wooden sculptures and stone sculptures, and you're literally buying and he's selling. It's literally monetizing religion, you know, in a way. So then I said then I did ask, why didn't the original source, that is more first principles approach to understanding humans, I'm talking about Vedas, not spread as widely? And it talked about the fact that Vedas are very hard to understand. It's very hard to imbibe. Only people who are surrounded in that culture, it's a way of life, can get it. And that's one of the reasons why it didn't. And also the European Orientalism, people who came to study Hinduism literally interpreted it from their lens, and they did a bad job of like promoting Hinduism. They focused too much on caste and stuff. And now that I'm reading original Gita, they actually disregard caste. They said all of this stuff eventually, you know, how the source book keeps getting interpreted, and some people like do it for their own advantage. They like literally made caste the big thing, while the original Gita says you can be a Brahmin, you can be a warrior, you can be anything you want. There's no such thing that one set of people are Brahmins or they have all the knowledge. Nothing of that sort. You can be all if you want. It's on you, in your personality or your desires, basically your tendencies to be what you want to be. You can be a poet, you can be anything. So now that I read the original source, I'm getting like so much clarity about everything, and I'm questioning my own religion, you know. So basically, anyways, it keeps going. And then with this approach, non-attachment, so I did quite a bit of inquiry. It has ended up confusing people by stripping key parts. Buddhism promotes detachment while Vedas promote learning to live in society. You know, so because it understands that we have to go through the messiness of living in society. You know, you can't like detach and become a hermit and say, okay, for instance, look at Buddha. Like, he promoted detachment, but his followers, his disciples, preserved his bones and his nails and everything. And so they still have got themselves attached to him. There's still attachment. So where is detachment here? What I'm trying to say is that either extremes doesn't help, and so you have to find like a balance. What Vedas is all about balance. So the real culprit is the Western light version, when Buddhism was packaged for exports. And the let go message, because that sells to stressed modern people They downplayed the full ethical framework, rebirth context, and everything. It's the irony of the Buddhism that's everywhere, and it's totally confusing people.